This week, I'd like to talk about um, Levinson and uh, and his theories. Next week, I'm going to focus more on gender role identity and uh, the transitional stages with that, and the cultural, multicultural aspects of it, and how we have moved forward um, with feminist theory and things like that. Um, but it's a lecture unto itself. I know the chapters have already been talking about this, but I just wanted to focus one lecture entirely on that, um, and also ask you to do some exercises related to it for your discussion posts. But this week, we're going to talk about Levinson. I'm going to try to share uh, the screen, and I want to walk you through uh, the PowerPoint, um, talking about it. You should be working on completing your first project, which is uh, reading the book, uh, Five People You Meet in Heaven. Um, if you have any problems or concerns about that, I can definitely help you with it, and accommodate whatever needs you have. Uh, but I know that's a big project, both in reading time, note taking, and in writing the paper. So, um, so the rest of uh, the material this week is only the chapters in the textbook and this lecture. I'm going to try to find a video on Levinson, um, but it should be a bit shorter than other weeks to give you some time to work on that project and finish that up. Um, okay, I just have to uh, share the screen here. Okay, so hopefully you can see PowerPoint as I move through this. This is Jeff's PowerPoint, and I think he got it from a textbook. Um, but before I begin the lecture on Levinson, I do want to say that um, he uh, took Erikson's theory and he really broke down the adulthood stages into a lot of sub-stages, looked at them more intensely. And he was one of the first people to do this. Now, at first, he wrote a book called, I think it was called The Seasons of a Man's Life. Um, and then, uh, and then he wrote one on women. I would like to say uh, that I don't agree with everything that he says. I think his theory is a good starting point, but it is limited and it is also dated. I think a lot has changed since he wrote both of these studies, um, especially the male study. I don't know why he only looked at males to begin with, um, but I feel he should have looked at both males and females together. Um, but later he looked at women. Uh, but I think that our society, in many ways, is the same, but in so many ways it is different now. Um, so, so let's see what he has to say. One thing you can talk about in your post is how things have changed. How do you see things differently than Levinson? Just because time has progressed, we're no longer the same as we were then. So here we have the basic Erikson psychosocial stages. He pulls out 20 to 35 and 35 to 60. Those would be considered the adulthood stages. Intimacy versus isolation, the quest for intimacy, the ability to share oneself with another person without being afraid of sacrificing one's own identity. And I don't think we do sacrifice our own identity. I think we add to our identity. Love and work, mate selection, and career choice. And then 35 to 60, generativity versus stagnation. And these are still Erikson. The need to be creative and productive in ways which will contribute to future generations, creating one's legacy for the future. And I don't know how well you can see this, but here we have Levenson's Stages of Adult Life. Calls it The Seasons of a Man's Life, 1978. So that was quite a while ago, 42 years. Here we have the different developmental periods in early and middle adulthood. We have the early adult transition. So we're moving from childhood and adolescence. We transition to adulthood in our early 20s. We enter the adult world. We have an age 30 transition. We have what's called settling down in our 30s. Then we have a midlife transition, 40 to 45. And he coined the phrase, or really looked at it, midlife crisis, because of this midlife transition. We're going to talk a little more about that. Then he talked about entering middle adulthood, going into 50 years old, and then the age 50 transition. Just a little self-disclosure. I'm 53, and the 50 seems to be kind of this milestone, just because, you know, I don't know, it's the number. But you know, I unconsciously forgot how old I was, and my wife had to remind me. I imagine I was in denial, or had repressed that. Then we have the culmination of middle adulthood, and then the late adulthood transition. Now, on the right, we see just brief explanations. I just want to point out a couple. The age 30 transitions. So a reappraisal of early adulthood commitments. Divorce often occurs around age 30. Occupational change. If I'm to change my life, I'd better do it now. People think like that. Settling down stage, time to be a successful, competent adult, commitment to occupation, family, independence from mentors, then the midlife transition. This is where he believes a midlife crisis can occur. It is the most common time, but it does not have to be during these ages. But I do believe that at some point in our middle life, somewhere in there, most people, men and women, do a little self-evaluation. Um, Something might prompt it. I'm wondering if any of you are at this age or older, and if you've experienced this. Um, I can share my personal experience of this. Um, so when I had turned 40, uh, I I was not in a relationship, not a permanent relationship, and um, I was a professor at Cal U, and I loved my job, and I planned, and I still do plan to stay at Cal U till I retire, God willing. And but I also worked at a camp called the Woodlands. It's a camp for children with disabilities and terminal illnesses or serious illnesses. And at 40, I did not have any children, uh, did not have a permanent relationship. And for a long time, that caused some anxiety throughout my 30s because I had always wanted a family. Well, around 41 or so, I evaluated my life and I found some peace uh, in where I was. And I thought, well, if I don't find a relationship, if I don't have my own family, I really have found meaning in working with these children at this camp and in mentoring students. And I found a lot of peace with that. And my anxiety lowered quite a bit. And I bought a small house, and until that time, I had just had apartments, so a little late. And but I bought a small house in Mount Lebanon, and it's funny that when we come to some sense of peace, that is often when positive change occurs. At 42, I met my wife, Trisha. We have 4 children. It was almost like, that baseball movie, if you build it, they will come. I had when you're a bachelor living in a house alone or single, uh, that house is pretty big. But with a bunch of kids, it was pretty small. I didn't know there was any such thing as a starter house, but there is. Uh, so it's funny how these things happen, you know. Um, and now I'm happy, 4 kids, and but I had found uh, some peace with where my life was, and now I'm even happier. So that's my own little story. Um, then we have the question, well, what have I done with my life? People begin to ask that. Coming to terms with dreams of one's youth, whether they are fulfilled or not, whether they are fulfilling or not. Maybe people dreamed to be, a CEO of a company or wealthy or whatever, but maybe they found that that's not fulfilling. Or maybe they never met a dream and perhaps it was unrealistic or it just didn't happen. Are they happy? Are they at peace? Have they, resolved this? What do they need to do to find fulfillment, peace, meaning where they're at? Do they have to do something different? I think these are legitimate questions. I think the unhealthy thing is when people compensate and do drastic things because they're looking for change. But not any change will do. It has to be meaningful. It It has to be a change that leads to fulfillment and peace and self-acceptance. But a lot of times it's not. A lot of counseling occurs during this stage. Then it moves on to the middle adulthood stage, living out previously made changes. For many of the most satisfying, enriching time of life. For me it is. Age 50 transition, time of moderate crisis, not like the previous one. I completely blocked it out. Men review where they have come from and make plans for where they're headed. The culmination of middle adulthood, period of great fulfillment. And so in one sense, I feel like I started this process a little late. Thank goodness my wife's a little younger. Somebody's got to chase after those kids. They'll either kill me or keep me young. You know, a lot of guys would be offended on our anniversary just last week, 10th anniversary. A guy knocked on the door. My wife answered it and, said, "Could I speak with your father?" And she laughed, thought I'd be offended. I'm like, heck no. I'm glad I'm married to, somebody like you. All right, enough about me. The stages of adult life. He has this a study, interviewed 40 men. It's extremely small, I thought, but you could read more about that, but I don't know how significant it was. He viewed life as a series of periods formed around developmental tasks, just like Erikson. The main goals, objectives, and concerns faced by individuals during each life period. Period ends when its tasks lose significance and new tasks emerge. Developmental transitions, period of personal crisis and reevaluation. Life structure questions, new decisions are made. We review and evaluate our past. We accept losses at the end of a period. We explore new options. We decide what to keep, what to discard. We consider possibilities for the future. In another class, and I don't want to be too repetitious, in my grief and loss class, which hopefully we'll be offering this winter, I talk about the disposable society and how it's easier to throw out a toaster than to fix it, and how that moves into our relationships. Whereas, it's important to work on a relationship or the mistakes will repeat themselves in the next relationship. But I go into that a lot deeper in that class. The move from pre-adulthood to adulthood, graduation from school, and this is just going into more depth for his sub-stages. Moving out of the family home, going to work, independence from family, financial and emotional autonomy. I think a lot of times this happens at a later age now. Expenses and student loans and all kinds of things. Trying to save for a house. It took me 40 years to do that. So, these time periods, some of these things happen at different times now. It says men have a dream, a vision of the future, usually viewed in terms of career. I find a lot of times that's accurate when I talk with people and they've done a little life review and they find that they've spent so much time and effort on their career, they've missed other parts of life, and they regret that. And you know, men have a mentor, an older person by 18 to 15 years, maybe a role model. Um, I never realized they were mentors, but I made friends with a lot of much older people. So when I was like going into college at 17 or so, uh, I made, it was a different time period too. You could have a different relationship with professors. You could go out, have a beer with them, hang out at their house, whatever. It was a much more casual time. Um, Now we have to be extremely professional and have professional boundaries. But throughout all of my degrees, um, I tended to make friends with a lot of professors who were much older. In fact, most of them were on the verge of retirement, um, but they were lifelong friends. And and I think I learned a lot from them, and they helped me a lot on my journey. Second important relationship, a woman who supports the dream, makes a man feel capable of obtaining it. Well, that's kind of old school and outdated, but hopefully we see it in more terms of equality these days. This was a long time ago, and I'm hoping there's a little more equality these days. Entering the adult world and 22 to 28, exploring and making commitments to adult roles, establishing a lifestyle. Work leads to a career choice. We might have a lot of different jobs, but eventually we end up in a career, hopefully. Now, these days, a lot of times people change jobs and careers more frequently. Intimate relationships lead to marriage, birth of children. Of course, he's talking about uh, male and female. Now we have much more openness as to uh, LGBTQ, all of the different kinds of relationships, which are perfectly acceptable. And I think any type of uh, stage theory or developmental theory has to uh, take those into consideration and include them just as any other relationship. Um, the age 30 transition, 28 to 33, reappraising the adult commitments, change, focus on adjustment and enrichment. That question, if I'm going to change, I better do it now. Sometimes people make rash decisions. Uh, might lead to crisis, divorce, occupational change, but sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's not. I wish more people would go to counseling during this stage rather than waiting until they're in their 40s. Settling down 33 to 40. So I missed that in my own life. I settled down when I was 42. Um, Culminating life structure for early adulthood, apprenticeships over, time to be successful, competent adult, the boom period, becoming one's own man, independence from mentor. Uh, Once again, of course, this language is dated and, you know, can be criticized easily. Deeply absorbed in commitments to occupation, family, and activities, a desire to get ahead, realize youthful ambitions. The midlife transition, the midlife crisis. What have I done with my life? I ask myself that all the time, uh, especially with regret theory. Uh, Coming to terms with the dreams of one's youth. Have not written that great American novel yet. Work on discrepancy between what is and what will be. Life takes a new sense of urgency. 80% of Levinson's subjects went through a personal crisis and reevaluation. Crisis may include divorce, extramarital affairs, occupational change, once again. These are a little shorter explanations. The middle adulthood, living out previously made changes, following through, good or bad, for many the most satisfying, enriching time of life, hopefully. Age 50 transition, a time of moderate crisis. Men review where they have come from, make plans for where they're heading. I guess they're talking about retirement. They're going to have to wheel me into the classroom when I'm like 80 years old. I'm not retiring. Might change my mind. I don't know. I got 4 kids. They might want to go to college. I don't know. Culmination of middle adulthood, 55 to 60. Finishing the framework of life, structure for middle adulthood, a period of great fulfillment. Late adult transition, ending middle age and preparing for late adulthood. So here we have, and I'd like to hear your comments on that. It's okay to criticize these theories if you don't agree with them, or give me a feminist perspective. That's good. Or maybe you're female and some of those apply to you, or maybe you are offended by some. That's okay. You know, this is old. Time for some change in these theories. But here 1992, still almost 30 years old. So here we have the inclusion of women. And once again, this is out of date as well. Study of dissertations, the mentor, women substantially less likely to have a mentor. I find that unfortunate, but I find it more common now when I talk with students, females and males. Oftentimes they have mentors in their internships or practicums. Love relationship, men seek women to support their dreams. Women seek a special man but see themselves as supporting his dreams. Once again, today I'm hoping that people are more equality minded, supporting each other in both their dreams. The dream, men find themselves by separating from family of origin and pursuing their own interests. Women develop identities through responsibilities and attachments of relationships. I'm hoping independence is positive for both individuals. And once again, we're talking about male-female relationships. Today, we should include all relationships. Male-male, female-female, whatever it might be. Men dream of occupational achievement, status, accomplishment. Women, less clear dreams, more tentative mix of family and career. So here we see moving into family and career. I think just, you know, a majority of women have careers now. And it makes it a little more difficult to balance the family and career thing. A lot of women don't have families, and that's fine as well. Nothing wrong with that. Same with men. I found some peace in that, and then bam. Levinson interviewed 45 women aged 35 to 45, including 15 homemakers, 15 female executives in major corporate financial organizations, and 15 faculty members. Sure, the faculty members were a little easier to come by, but I'm glad they included both homemakers and there's probably a better term for that, but you know, and female executives at corporations. I'm glad they included them. Women, similar to men, go through age-linked developmental stages. often moving from one stage to the next through painful and turbulent periods of transition. Homemakers dreamed in youth of traditional family-centered life. By midlife, uh, all but one working outside the home. Half were legally divorced, most of the rest psychologically divorced. That's kind of interesting. Uh, Motherhood was a less central component of their life structure. Increased independence and desire to exist on more equal terms with men. Levinson concluded that a traditional marriage is no longer viable in our culture. Career women. Career women dreamed in youth of modifying their traditional homemaker pattern. At midlife, intense struggle between the traditional homemaker figure and the internal anti-traditional figure, attempting to be everything to everyone, seeking to have everything, plagued by exhaustion, worries about their children, and exasperation with their spouses who failed to do their fair share of household responsibilities and childcare. Well, I imagine that part probably still happens, and it shouldn't. Small biased samples, uh, not a random cross-section of men or women. These are problems. Generational issues. Will future generations follow the same patterns? So my question to you is, what do you think about this generation? Or these ages currently? All the different ages here currently. What happens? Is it different? Is it similar? What's going on in your mind? Practical applications. People seek help during periods of crisis. Understanding the difficulties of transitions from one stage of life to the next is useful for helping people understand and work through the crises they experience. Tasks of transition. Review and evaluate the past, accept losses at the end of a period, explore new options, decide what to keep and what to discard. Possibilities for the future. Okay. So hopefully we're back, and I'd like you to discuss your chapter readings in the book, but I'd also like your opinions, and it's okay to disagree with anything. And give me your own opinion. I want to hear it. These are not my opinions, other than what I shared about my own life. But give me your opinions. What's going on in your life? Or if you're younger than these ages, what do you think would happen? What would you like to happen? Or maybe you're looking at a parent or something like that. Anything you want to talk about, but apply it to your own life in some way, or your thoughts about this theory. I just want to hear your own opinions about it, and about the chapters, and about any videos that I might post. Thanks. Have a good week.